Hi all, welcome to our first advisor segment of the year. So this morning I'm joined by Niel Kasselman, Director and Wealth Manager at Strategic, an advisory partner network out in the Pretoria region. Also one of our first DFM partners at Inat Invest. Welcome, Niel.
Thanks, Waseem. Thanks for inviting me on the call.
Sure, great to have you. To kick off, perhaps you can tell us a bit about your history, key milestones, and your journey in the financial services industry thus far.
Sure, Waseem. I think I pretty much only ever really worked in financial services. I joined Liberty as an underwriting clerk sort of 6 months out of high school, which was obviously my sister worked for the head of underwriting in Liberty Pretoria, so it was quite an easy fit for me. And I think it served as a good foundation for somebody starting off a career in financial services. I started my career as a financial advisor with a Liberty affiliate operation company called the Prudent Consulting Group based out in Bedford View. And I did this at the ripe old age of 21, which I must tell you was not an easy task to undertake as a youngster. In 2003, I left the Liberty affiliate and along with a business partner, opened my own brokerage company called Strategic Financial Consulting. And I guess over the years, a number of the advisors and brokers that we'd recruited into the industry prior to that sort of gravitated to that brokerage. And, one by one, we grew into a sizable brokerage. And I think that's where we first really became a bit of a family at Strategic. In 2012, we were approached by Liberty, and we then started a Liberty affiliate operation called Strategic, where we house a small team of advisors, and we still have the brokerage, which obviously operates in the independent space with a number of independent brokers that sit in that space. So that's pretty much my background.
Okay, so safe to say Strategic is quite a unique proposition on offer to both client and advisor. So with that in mind, I mean, you were one of our first partners, and I recall quite a lengthy due diligence process followed by you and the Strategic Investment Committee before you made a decision to partner with anyone, and specifically us at that point in time. And I remember really being put through our paces at the time. This also did give us an understanding of how unique and institutionalized your business already was at that point in time. Perhaps you can give us a bit of an overview of your business and your value proposition to both client and advisor.
Sure, no problem. Sure, Waseem, I think if I had to sum up Strategic in one sentence, it would be an unrelenting focus on quality. Everything we do is about quality. It's about quality advisors. It's about quality clients. It's about quality relationships pretty much with everybody we come into contact with. So I think in an industry that's historically been obsessed with quantity, and I think if you look at most of the asset managers and insurers, quantity is a major driver. We've got an obsession with quality. I think our business is currently and has been for some time pretty much on two different journeys. I think the first journey for us is very much about the customer experience. And that really has to do with how clients experience their engagements with strategic advisors. So I think this is driven by our primary objective, which is to leave everybody we come into contact with better off for having engaged with us. And I mean that across the board. That's employees, advisors, clients, various service providers. And I think this is also very much about moving away from the stereotypical client-advisor engagements and trying to look at a more curated client experience from that perspective. I think, though, it's also about us helping our advisors to fulfill their true potential and really become the best versions of themselves, which I think is something that is fundamental to becoming someone that is very good at what we do. I mean, naturally, our proposition includes the significant financial rewards that you would expect. We've got the overseas annual incentives and all of those things. But in my opinion, there's a lot more to a value proposition than just money. And anybody who's making decisions based on just money is almost indefinitely making the wrong one. True mentorship is something that's quite rare in this industry. And this is, I think, one of the reasons why most brokers and advisors never really quite fulfill their potential. So Waseem, for us, it's about more than just developing an advisor's ability to go out and give good financial advice. It's really about helping them become better versions of themselves. So we always focus on developing our advisors on a personal level, because I think this is what makes them quality advisors. And ultimately, that's what makes them exceptional at what they do.
Cool. You mentioned something quite important, I mean, quality. And just touching on that, we saw it through your process, or how robust your due diligence process was, specifically how you've institutionalized that investment advice process, and obviously your partners within your business taking on that investment process themselves. Maybe you can take us through what that due diligence process was like prior to actually partnering with us, and then to follow on to this, how you're now using that due diligence process with an in-sourced investment capability like ourselves.
Sure. Yeah, I do remember that, Waseem. I remember when we first engaged, and obviously we put you guys through the ringer. We wanted to make sure we were making the right decision. I've been managing assets for clients now for almost 27 years. And we realized probably 8 or 9 years ago that the environment in which we were operating was becoming increasingly complex. There's a lot of potential for conflict of interest. We were seeing obviously already then a big drive by some of the asset managers, and in particular the big insurers, to push assets onto balance sheets. We obviously see a lot of white labeled fund solutions that were available in the market, many of which add absolutely zero value to the client and are just feedback mechanisms to make money. And then obviously the regulatory environment was a big factor. It was becoming more and more onerous. We were becoming liable not just for the advice we were giving, but for the advice we didn't give. You were even liable for things that you didn't do. So we made a decision back then already that we were going to move to what we called a rules-based investment model, pretty much a model where we constructed a set of rules. It took us a bit of time. We constructed a set of rules that dictated, which asset managers and which portfolios, we were willing to invest clients' money with. We started off pretty much with all the funds available to South African investor. We put it through this filter of rules that we had, and we distilled it down to a very short list of qualifying funds. And we did this, Waseem, pretty much to remove the conflict of interest, in our decision making. We did this to remove emotion or personal opinions from that decision making. And I think we did it to a certain extent to remove the bias that we hold. So these rules were there to govern that decision making process. I think we went further than that. These rules didn't just dictate how we invested clients' money. They also dictated when we would move clients' money. There was a set of criteria that needed to be fulfilled before we would move money away from a particular portfolio. And I think that gave strong direction to the sort of decisions we were making. A lot of advisors don't easily move money out of portfolios once they're there. And sometimes I think there are instances where you do need to move money, but you can't be doing it without a guideline as to how to do that. So we took these rules, we sent it off to 91, that was Investec at the time, to Stanlib, to Coronation, to Alan Gray, and we told them to just tear those rules apart, criticize it, tell us what they liked and what they felt we needed to change. And what we were left with at the end was quite a robust set of rules. We had a house view panel of our senior investment specialists that met on a quarterly basis and pretty much sort of ensured that all the funds we were using were still, fulfilling the criteria we'd laid down. I think what made this powerful was the way that we learned to articulate the rules-based process. And I think this is where I think there's a massive benefit for advisors using a DFM as well. So, in relation to your second question and how that fits in with the DFM, I think basically we'd already made the mental shift away from picking funds merely based on past performance or how well we know the asset manager or which brands are popular in the minds of our clients. The innate DFM sort of presented itself as an extension of the work we'd already done on the rules-based model, and it was a very natural fit for us. Initially, because obviously, as you say, one has to gain trust. We blended the two strategies, so we used our own house view rules-based strategy alongside the DFM, and I think it's a good option for brokers out there that are looking to make the shift, but maybe are a little bit reluctant and they want to dip their toe in the water. It's a good option to sort of blend the two initially. Until you have the confidence to trust the DFM to manage the funds, which where we're at right now. We're 100% happy for the DFM to be making those investment calls for us.
Thanks, Neil. Quite a comprehensive answer there. You touched on quite a few things which I think resonate within the industry. I think DFMs obviously have been a substantial trend that we've seen play out in financial services, driven by a couple of comments that you made, regulation, RDR and TCF, which exists today, the complexity in terms of just that investment in the universe. I mean, 1,700 unit trust, over 10,000 global funds. And then also that disconnect historically that advisors would have experienced. And you touched on it quite a bit in your conversation, the asset management component, which is slightly far removed from the actual advice process. I think what DFMs obviously solved was bringing those two a lot closer together, just making sure what's on the tin is actually inside the tin as well. So thanks for that. I think importantly, I mean, you made the decision based on quite a few insights around what you saw happening out there in the industry. Perhaps you can just chat to us about any other challenges you as a business owner, as well as a wealth manager, are facing out there right now. I think that there are quite a few pitfalls and the industry is changing quite a bit. But from your side, I mean, what are you seeing out there considering just the insights you had way before many others around adopting an institutionalized advice process?
Well, I think we've seen some of them are quite obvious. I've already alluded to the regulatory environment. I think we've had a little bit of a breather on that, and I think maybe we've got COVID to thank for that. But the regulations are going to continue to become more stringent and far more complex. I think one of the challenges that we're facing as financial advisors is that access to information has increased dramatically. Clients are becoming a lot more informed, and this has a number of effects on us as advisors. But I think one of them is that it's becoming harder to add true value to a client, and it's certainly becoming harder to evidence that value. You need to be able to evidence to a client why he's paying you. And I think this is specifically true if you don't have some kind of formal documented process that governs how you're selecting these asset managers, or if you're not dealing with someone like a DFM. One of the things I've always found fascinating when a client comes to me and we analyze their portfolio is, when they're stuck in a portfolio that really just makes no sense. Where they've been in a fund that is consistently underperformed its benchmark, or there's a complete mismatch with what the client's expected outcome is, and the historical sort of capabilities of that fund. And I think in instances like this, we need to accept that at some point, both clients and the regulator are going to start asking uncomfortable questions. The regulator doesn't find on performance and these things at this point in time. But I think we need to accept that the environment is becoming sophisticated. It's the increased complexity, not only of the financial planning tools, but also of the sort of artificial intelligence that's coming at us. I mean, I think everybody's heard of Chat GPT by now, and you've got robo-advice. And I think these are threats to financial advisors and to brokerages, particularly small brokerages. I think then you've also got the fact that the JSE has become smaller in terms of numbers of listed entities over the years, and that with that has come this influence that a disproportionate number of probably 4 or 5 individual shares has on the JSE. And I think we've seen this play out in the last few years. You needed to get those calls right on those 4 or 5 different shares. And if you didn't, it led to quite a dramatic performance swing. You could see that baked into the mix of some of the asset managers where, one had made those calls right and the performance swing was dramatic. And I think we're going to see more and more of that. So it's also to a certain degree exposed some of the active managers. I think a lot of brokers will feel that they didn't perform as advertised. The downside protection that is supposedly built into some of the funds didn't really do what it was supposed to do, and the active management didn't always create the alpha. So I think these are important elements. On top of this, you've got all the domestic uncertainty, we've got a lot of negativity about the economy. There's a lot of fear management that us as brokers and advisors have to bring to clients. We've got to manage the fear that they have over their future and over their families' futures. And then on top of all of that, you've got this geopolitical uncertainty. So I think all of these things have meant it's been a very tough a 5-year cycle, particularly for annuitants, but also for advisors, having to go back to clients and have often what is very complex conversations. So now more than ever, I think we need to be very close to our clients. We need to be able to evidence the value that we're adding to their lives. But I think we also need to be able to help them navigate through these very complex and volatile times. And I'm just not sure that the average broker is equipped to do that effectively, if they don't have the backing of a DFM behind them.
Thanks, Niel. As an advisor network, in your conversation you just had, or the answer you just gave me, focus on that quality conversation, specifically at a client level, making sure clients' hands are held along the process and the journey, fully understanding the advice that's been given, making sure they're in those right solutions. How's the adoption been of the proposition you've taken out to market? Obviously, us coming and sitting behind your proposition or value proposition to client. How has clients taken this on, or the experience of clients been?
Yeah, so I think for our advisors, on the whole, they've embraced the DFM. As I said earlier, for us, I don't think it was a dramatic change in advice process, and I don't think it was a dramatic change in our clients' experience, simply because of our rules-based investment model. We'd made the mental shift some time ago to move away from promoting, specific funds, and rather focus on educating our clients on our process. And I think that's the strength that a DFM brings. Waseem, our advisors have on the whole embraced the DFM. I think for us it was not a dramatic change in our advice process, and I think it was maybe a small change for our clients in terms of the experience, simply because we were already using the rules-based model. So I don't think it was a dramatic change. We'd already made that mental shift some time ago, sort of away from promoting, specific funds, and to focus more on educating clients on our DFM process. And I think this is fundamental. It's merely just a fund of funds, a combination of a blend of asset managers. But in truth, it's a lot more powerful than that. If you educate your clients on your process, on the process that sits behind the DFM, on the credibility that it lends to your process, clients start to shift their thinking away from focusing on the asset managers, away from this, performance-driven discussion about fund fact sheets. So, to my mind, a DFM lends significant credibility to the process, and it changes up the conversation that you're having with your client, away from discussing these fund fact sheets to discussing process.
And then lastly, to wrap up, through your experience and this journey of finding a partner and selecting a in-sourced investment capability, is there anything, or if you could leave everyone with one piece of advice today around selecting and partnering with a DFM, what would that be?
My advice would be really that if you haven't already done it, you have to separate yourself from performance, as a financial advisor. Our jobs are really just to identify the client's need, to invest the money in such a way, that increases the likelihood of achieving the objective the client has set. And at the same time, to do so whilst exposing the client to as little risk as possible that is needed to achieve that targeted return. And we need to accept that the rest is not up to us. Markets are going to do what they're going to do. When you sit down with a client and you've had an exceptional return and you're showing them a 25% investment return, it's not you. And exactly the same when you sit down with a client and markets have performed poorly, it's also not you. You have to separate yourself from the performance. It's really about obviously ensuring that your client is in the best possible space they could have been in during that cycle. And I think that's the fundamental key. With regard to selecting a DFM partner, I would definitely advise selecting a DFM where they've got consistent processes and where they've got a credible track record. Partly why we joined with you guys is specifically that. This is fundamental. You can't experiment with your client's money. You can't experiment with your brokerage. I'd say the DFM has to have a robust engagement with you. You need to be able to understand their philosophy properly. I think, before you can truly commit to a partnership of that nature. And I must say, we had, as you mentioned earlier, many robust engagements and discussions. And you need to be careful. There are posers out there. We engage with a lot of different DFMs and white labeling offerings. There's some of them that talk a very good game, but there isn't necessarily the proper due diligence. There isn't the necessary machine behind that. Some of these are just money spinners. So, ultimately, I think if you're going to partner with a DFM, you want to do it with one that's going to allow high levels of engagement and a degree of input into fund selection. One of the things we've loved is that we've been able to engage with you when we felt that there were some changes that needed to be made. And we were quite surprised at how quickly some of those changes were made on the management of funds. And I think that's very, very important for us. So, yeah, Waseem, I think on the whole, we're very happy with the way our partnership with you guys has developed. And I can just say it's certainly working for us and our clients.
Niel, thanks. So firstly, thanks for joining us and taking time out to actually share your story and your journey with us. And then I hope that everybody that has dialed in has found it insightful, and also why, or the rationale behind why you choose a DFM came through quite clearly from Niel. Thanks.
Innate is a registered trademark of Stanlib Wealth Management Pty Limited, an authorized financial services provider.